The movie opens at a bar in the neighborhood of Inwood, New York, where a former Marine, Chicky, is partying with his friends. It's 1967 and the Vietnam War is at its peak, but Chicky does not seem to be bothered by it as he spends most of his time sleeping at his parents' home. His irresponsible attitude often gets him scolded by his father, but Chicky does not care at all as he thinks it's time to relax and enjoy his life. One night, as Chicky is being mocked at the dinner table, his sister Christine shows up while sobbing and informs the family about an old friend Johnny who died on the battlefield. Depressed, she openly expresses her anti-war views, but Chicky and his father, both of whom have served before, oppose her views. They think that being in the military is an honorable job, and Johnny sacrificed his life for a great cause because he was defending the country, but Christine storms out in disagreement. Following his daily routine, Chicky and his friends share a drink while listening to the latest news at the local bar run by an old man known as the Colonel. The Colonel is in favor of the war, thinking it is in the country's best interest, but he is not happy with the media coverage. The group agrees with him as he shares that the media should stop insensitive reporting from the war zone. Chicky and his friends then attend Johnny's funeral, where they are informed that another one of their fellows, Tommy, went missing in Vietnam. The news comes as a shock for Chicky, who is a very close friend of Tommy and even convinced him to join the military. While thinking about his friend, Chicky reminisces about the good old times they spent together in Inwood. After the funeral, Chicky and his friend Red come across an anti-war demonstration. Furious, Chicky gets into an argument with the protesters while sharing his views that such activities should be completely banned. As he is aggressively sharing his views, Red spots Christine in the crowd and informs Chicky about her. Considering her participation as an embarrassment for the family, he forces her to go home, but Christine refuses to comply. They get into an argument, but Red intervenes while telling her about Tommy. She is distressed to hear the news and thinks the deaths of their loved ones are another reason to raise their voice against the war. Disapproving her opinion, Chicky gets upset and picks a fight with the protesters. Soon, Red is knocked unconscious by a guy and Chicky is forced to leave with him. That night, while they are having a drink at the same bar, the Colonel shares his views against the anti-war demonstration as he thinks it will send a negative message to their soldiers fighting in Vietnam. As the trio discusses the ongoing conflict, the Colonel wishes there was a way he could go down to the battlefield to present a beer to the soldiers and thank them for their services. Chicky loves this idea and thinks about pursuing it. Given his careless lifestyle, Red thinks it's just a drunken plan, but Chicky assures him that he will go there to show solidarity with the soldiers. The Colonel even offers some free beers and motivates him to go ahead while the rest of the group also announces support for Chicky. After learning about his plan the next day, everyone in the neighborhood starts giving him presents to give to their loved ones on the battlefield. Although Chicky has now started second-guessing his decision of traveling all the way to the war zone, he cannot back out because if he does, everyone will consider him a failure. Knowing about his lack of determination, Chicky's family also teases him for coming up with this nearly impossible idea, but Chicky defends it. As the family discusses whether he can do it or not, Tommy's mother visits the family and requests that Chicky hand over a rosary bead to her son if he finds him. Chicky is moved by her expectations and finalizes his decision. After getting the information about the next ship to Vietnam, Chicky finally packs up his stuff in a bag full of beer to present to his soldier friends as a symbol of friendship and support. Christine tries her best to stop him, but he still departs on this journey of a lifetime. After months of traveling by a cargo ship, he eventually arrives in Saigon and starts searching for his buddies. After seeking information from the officers, he finally manages to locate a military policeman, Collins, who is over the moon to see his old friend coming all the way down to Vietnam, but says he should not have risked his life for them. Chicky spends a few hours with Collins' fellows, but a senior officer does not approve of his presence among the soldiers. Suspecting he might be a CIA agent, the officer asks him some questions to learn about his background. Chicky tells him about his plan of delivering beer to soldiers serving in Vietnam. Although the officer does not believe his story, he leaves without asking any further questions. The group thinks this investigation might get him in trouble, but Chicky does not seem to care and spends the night dancing with them. Later that night, as the soldiers are advising him on how to find his other friends, Collins interrupts the discussion and warns him about the dangers ahead. The next morning, he thanks Chicky for his sweet gesture but requests that he give up on the idea of finding others. Because he does not want to abandon his plan after traveling for so long, Chicky resumes his journey through southern Vietnam. While searching around the area, he meets a local traffic warden, Hugh, who guides him to the Caravel Hotel. Upon arriving, Chicky spots many American and British press reporters in the lobby, but learns that they are against the ongoing war. Due to his contrasting views, Chicky gets into an argument with them and says they should send positive news from the battlefield so people back home don't lose hope. During the discussion, he also discloses his expedition and requests their help in arranging transport to find his other friends. After listening to him, a senior reporter, Arthur Coates, reveals that the area is only safe for military travel, but Chicky is not ready to give up. After spending hours on the road, he eventually succeeds in hitching a ride on a military caravan that drops him at Bien Hoa Air Base. Pretending to be a CIA agent, he manages to convince the officials to let them get on a plane en route to Da Nang Air Base. At the airbase, an officer, Lieutenant Habershaw, who already received information about him, welcomes him and agrees to get him a flight to his next destination. After having lunch with Habershaw and his friends, Chicky resumes on his journey on a helicopter that finally takes him to LZ Jane. After arriving at the post, he asks about his friend Rick Duggan serving in the 1st Cavalry Division. At his request, the sergeant sends a radio message to Rick asking him to report to the command post immediately. Rick follows the orders but has to run for his life during the incoming heavy fire from the enemy. When he finally reaches the post, Chicky surprises him. Rick cannot believe Chicky almost got himself killed for the sake of his surprise and argues with him for not understanding the seriousness of the situation. After the heated discussion, Rick decides to take him to the battlefield so he can experience it with his own eyes. So, Rick and Chicky run back to the front line. Although they successfully make it to the trench during the intense crossfire, Chicky is astonished by the sight as he has only been relying on the news and has never been in the field before. Soon after, there is another clash between the US Army and the Viet Cong, where both groups try their best to take others down. After things cool down, Chicky is handing over beers to everyone in the trench when Rick informs him that one of their friends, Reynolds, just got killed. After spending a rainy night listening to everyone's stories, Chicky has one last beer with the group in the morning when a guy takes his picture and presents it to him as a souvenir. Rick informs him that he can't go any further with them and urges him to go back. Chicky gives him a pair of socks his mother sent to him and says goodbye. After Rick leaves with the group, Chicky gets on a helicopter to return to the base, but he is shocked to see 2 CIA agents torturing a prisoner and throwing him out. When he is about to get off, the officer questions him about his background, but Chicky keeps his cover and pretends to be one of them. After arriving at the Kontum airfield, he asks about the next flight to Saigon. Although the officer initially denies his request, he later informs Chicky that he may leave his post to drop him off, but Chicky gets suspicious. After seeing the same CIA agents outside and realizing they are after him, he jumps out of the window and flees. The officers follow him through the forest, but give up on the chase after being unable to locate him. Continuing on the trek, Chicky finds a destroyed military jeep by the road, which reminds him of how he and his friends used to discuss the war but were never able to figure out who was doing the right thing. While thinking about it, he comes across a young local boy and he is surprised to see the boy's reaction. Realizing the boy is afraid of him, Chicky tries to comfort him, but his mother appears from the field and takes him away. At night, Chicky barely survives getting crushed by the herd of elephants when he spots a military jeep and thinks the officers have tracked him down. Luckily, it's one of his friends, Looney, who cannot understand what Chicky is doing right in the middle of the war zone. Chicky describes how he was being chased by the CIA agents and requests Looney to drive him back to Saigon. As they are headed in the opposite direction, Looney hesitates to help him but agrees to drop him off. By now, Chicky has realized the bitter truth about the war and the amount of devastation it caused, but he still keeps moving forward. After arriving in Saigon, he intends to board the ship, but learns it has sailed off and is on its way to the Philippines. Disappointed, Chicky leaves the building when he once again meets Hugh, who leads him to the US Embassy. Thanking him for his help, Chicky shares his address with Hugh and invites him over to his house in New York. At the embassy, a lady helps him and arranges a flight to Manila so he can catch his ship, but he has to wait until the morning. Chicky decides to spend the night at the Caravel Hotel. He meets the same group of journalists and shows them a photo to prove that he actually went to LZ Jane to meet his friends. Arthur and Chicky have a deep conversation when Arthur reveals that he has seen the adversities of war and lost many friends over the past few years. Soon there is an attack by the Viet Cong and they are forced to run for their lives. The duo arrive outside the embassy but witness a horrible explosion that kills many soldiers and injures others. Chicky also spots an armored vehicle blowing a hole in the embassy's boundary wall. Soon, he finds Hugh's dead body and rushes to him, but Arthur forces him to leave. After spending the night at a destroyed house, both leave to witness the aftermath of the last night's attack, and Chicky is distressed because there are injured and dead people all around him. After a while, they rejoin the reporters and see a huge explosion in the distance. Learning it's the Long Bin post, Chicky informs the group that he must go there because one of his friends is at that same base. Arthur tries to stop him, but seeing his determination, decides to accompany him to the post. They talk about the last night's events when Chicky reveals seeing the armored vehicle, and Arthur suspects the attack might be an inside job executed to blame it on the enemy. While driving there, Chicky watches many locals sitting by their loved ones' dead bodies and rethinks his views about supporting the war, because he never realized the seriousness of the situation before actually coming to the battlefield. The duo eventually reaches the base where Chicky finds his injured friend Bobby Pappas. After giving him a beer, Chicky tells him that he is leaving soon, but Bobby informs him that the flight operation is halted until the next orders and only military planes can fly in and outside the country. Chicky's disturbed by this news and calls Habershaw and pleads with him to get him on a plane to the US. After he agrees, Chicky walks up to Arthur, who is taking photographs of the war zone, and urges him to leave with him. Arthur thanks him for being considerate but declines the offer. He tells Chicky that he will stay in Vietnam because it's his job to report the truth and gets back to work. After they say goodbye to each other, Bobby gives him a ride to Da Nang Air Base. After thanking Habershaw for his favor, Chicky tries to reveal his true identity, but Habershaw does not believe him because he is still under the impression that he is an agent and just trying to cover up his tracks. As Chicky is about to leave, Bobby admires his kind gesture but breaks the sad news that they have found Tommy Minogue's dead body. Devastated, Chicky travels to the US on a cargo plane carrying the dead bodies of American soldiers. Chicky finally comes back to New York where his friends warmly welcome him. This experience changes his point of view about the war as he has finally seen the consequences. So the next time he is talking to the colonel and his friends at the bar, Chicky shares that he is not sure whether they are fighting to save the world. After the heartfelt conversation, he leaves the bar to meet Tommy's mother and returns the rosary beads to her. She shares that she is proud of him for going to the war zone, but he thinks it was useless because it did not help anyone. Crying over the loss of his friends, he takes responsibility for his death as he was the one who talked him into going to Vietnam, but Tommy's mother forgives him with a hug. After a while, Chicky visits the park where he sits among the tributes to deceased soldiers. Christine joins him when he tells her he has quit drinking. After telling them that they were worried about him, Christine also appreciates him for going to Vietnam and supporting the soldiers. Both quietly sit together on a bench when Chicky shares his last beer with her. The postscript reveals that all of Chicky's friends, including Collins, Rick Duggan, Looney, and Bobby, made it back to Inwood, New York. If you enjoyed that recap, I got a good feeling you'll enjoy this one too. Click on the video on your screen for more.